the way in which wudu has been introduced to us by the Ahlul Bayt alayhimu salatu wassalam. The first hadith that I would like to mention is a hadith from our sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam. And if you remember last week, we discussed a few ahadith that mentioned that wudu, if it is done properly, then it can act as a kafara or an atonement for sins that may have been committed during the day or during the night. It can cover up and be a source for the forgiveness of those sins, especially if it is the wudu before the Maghrib prayer and before the Fajr prayer, where a person already is in a state of purity, but they do wudu in order to prepare for and honor that prayer. Here our sixth Imam gives us one other benefit of wudu, in which he says, إذا سميت في الوضوء طهر جسدك كله وإذا لم تسمي لم يطهر من جسدك إلا ما مر عليه الماء. That if a person mentions the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and says Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim and does tasbih of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and dua, mentioning the name of Allah while doing wudu, then simply by doing wudu, the entire body becomes tahir and pure. But if a person does not do that and sort of does the wudu quickly, without that level of attention, without mentioning the name of Allah, praising Allah, praying to Allah, then لم يطهر من جسدك إلا ما مر عليه الماء. Then the wudu, it doesn't have that same effect. Then wherever the water reaches, that will become pure physically, but it won't have that spiritual sense. So when the Imam says that your entire body will become pure, he isn't saying obviously that physical hygiene will be maintained, that germs will somehow magically flee from the body. But what the Imam is saying is that then that wudu, because it is also a source of prayer, of remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it will have a dual benefit. It will cleanse our physical body, but it will also be a source of purification and blessing spiritually for our entire body. And that is why there are certain du'as that have been mentioned, which it is recommended to pray or to recite while doing wudu. But at the very least, mention the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, and recite the Shahada. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. The wudu should be something that we give importance to, salawat. And it should not just be something which is very quickly and casually done. There is another hadith from the noble Prophet of Islam, Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, which illustrates the importance that should be given to wudu. Our sixth Imam narrates that there was a person who did wudu and who prayed at the time of the Prophet. فَقَالَ لَهُ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ أَعِدُ وُضُوءَكَ وَصَلَاتَكَ. Go and repeat your wudu and your prayer. So that person said that maybe I did something wrong, maybe something was mistaken. So that person, he went and he repeated his wudu and he repeated his salat. Then the Prophet came to him after he had done his prayer the second time and said, أَعِدُ وُضُوءَكَ وَصَلَاتَكَ. Go back and repeat your wudu and your prayer. So he did that, did his wudu a third time, he prayed a third time, and the Prophet, when he saw him, he said, repeat it once more. فَأَتَى أَمِيرَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامِ. So that man, he came to Amir al-Mu'mineen, فَشَكَى ذَلِكَ إِلَيْهِ. He said that this is what the Prophet told me, and I've done it 3 times now, and every time, of course, he would have been more careful because he knew the sights of the Prophet were on him and the Prophet was observing what he was doing. So if the first time he had been careless, the second and third time he would have been more careful. So he said to Amir al-Mu'mineen, what is it that I should do? فَقَالَ لَهُ هَلْ سَمَّيْتَ حِينَ تَوَضَّأْتَ. Did you mention the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala pardon me, and glorify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when you did wudu? قَالَ لَا. Said that no, I did not do that. قَالَ سَمِّ عَلَى وُضُوئِكَ فَسَمَّ وَتَوَضَّأَ وَصَلَّى. So the Imam said, then do that, and then repeat what you were doing. The person repeated his wudu, he repeated his prayer, and then he came to the Prophet, فَلَمْ يَأْمُرْهُ أَنْ يُعِيدُ. And this time the Prophet said that your prayer is correct and acceptable, and he didn't say for him to repeat the prayer. Now, in this incident, the person's wudu and prayer were not invalid, but they had not been done properly. They had not been done in a way that could give that person the benefit that was intended to be derived from wudu and from prayer. So simply because of a deficiency in the wudu, even the prayer becomes deficient, even if it is done correctly. So this is another incident in which we are reminded of the importance of wudu and its role in making sure that our prayers are accepted and are rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in these ahadith we also have a reminder once again of the connection in Islam between physical purity and between spiritual purity. And there are other ahadith that also emphasize this connection. Please recite salawat. One of these series of ahadith is that group of ahadith that talk about some of the preliminary acts that should be done before wudu. Now, two of the more important acts which are done before wudu are to rinse our mouth with water and to rinse our noses with water. And in addition to that, it is also recommended to brush one's teeth every time a person does wudu. And of course, before any of these things should be done, a person should wash their hands. Now, these are acts which are separate from wudu, but they are recommended because they increase a person's hygiene and a person's cleanliness. And they are part of the recommended acts of wudu. But unfortunately, there were a group of Muslims, the Zaydis, some of the Sunni schools of thought, that made these other acts to be wajib and an obligation along with wudu. And the imams, at the same time as they wanted to emphasize the importance of good hygiene, they did not want the lines of Sharia to be blurred. They did not ever want a person to feel the need or feel the right to say, well, this is good, let me add it to Sharia. If we wash ourselves more carefully, we add a washing of our hands, we add a washing or rinsing of our mouth, then what is wrong with that? It's more clean. It doesn't waste a lot of water, it doesn't take a lot of time. But the Imams did not want the Sharia to change. Because the Sharia, as it was legislated by the Prophet, as it was conveyed from Allah to the people, that allows us to practice properly no matter what situation we may be in. It has different laws which we may have to apply differently in different situations. When we begin adding things to Sharia from our own side and say, well, this is good, let us make that part of our practice, and then we start blurring the lines between what is wajib from Allah's side and what we are doing on our own initiative, then we are destroying the purposes and the wisdom behind Allah's legislation. And so the Imams, they emphasized that these additional things, they are recommended, but they are not part of the wudu. They should never be confused with wudu. That includes using a lot of water, repeating the washing. Sometimes, especially other schools of law within Islam, they will wash each organ that is washed in wudu 3 times. And the Imams emphasize that that is not part of wudu. Once washing thoroughly is part of wudu. Beyond that, you don't get any extra reward. A second time is acceptable, but a third time, the Imams have actually called it a bid'ah. But that is going beyond the limit, and it is not just something which won't give you a reward, but it might actually cause Allah to be displeased. So that exaggeration is not good. Similarly, when it comes to the rinsing of the mouth and the nose, there is a hadith from our 6th Imam, Imam Ja'far Sadiq, in which he says, Al-madmadatu wal-istinshaq mimma sanna Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. That madmada and istinshaq, rinsing of the mouth and rinsing of the nose. This is part of the sunnah of the Prophet. He added it as a way of increasing the cleanliness and the purification of wudu. But it is not part of the wudu, it is not part of the obligation. If a person does not do it, their wudu is correct, and the prayers that they will make after that, they are also correct. So we have here a reminder that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He did teach His Prophet and He gave him that instruction to maintain the best level of hygiene. But we should be clear what is our religious obligation and what is something that we are doing